Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a slightly later than advertised Scotland at 7. With me, Gordon Ross. It is the 17th of September. Joining me in the studio this evening are our regular contributors, Effie Samara, a writer and researcher. Welcome back to the show. Effie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Gordon.
And of course, our regular contributor, Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back again, Chris.
Good evening, all.
Okay, we're going to get straight on with the coronavirus update. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 707,682 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK government's regional testing centres. Of these, 684,109 were confirmed negative and 23,573 were positive. There are 290 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. But there are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This, of course, will be an underestimate of the number of cases because not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 52, this is using a new method of reporting, were in hospital last night, 5 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,501. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,705 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 21 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just in hospitals. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation here tonight, you can do so on Twitter by following us at BroadcastScot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. And now to our first story this evening, a BBC U-turn on the First Minister's COVID-19 briefings. A statement released this afternoon by the BBC said, "With the pandemic still a major cause of public concern, we will, over the coming weeks, and as we have done this week, look to cover the Scottish Government health briefings live on television." The turnaround today was announced shortly before an all-under-one-banner demonstration was due to take place at Pacific Quay, the BBC's headquarters in Scotland. When the decision to block the First Minister's daily coronavirus was announced just over a week ago, it was met with anger all across Scotland. Here we have some footage that Kenny McBride shot earlier today. Now, let's first of all go to you, Effie, I think, for your reaction to this. The BBC has done a major U-turn, it seems. Is this due down to public pressure? Is it to do with the lack of licence revenue?
Well, you know, there's something to be said about the principle of resistance. And I'm a great believer in the principle of political resistance, in good, peaceful, reasoned and seasoned resistance. You cannot simply just take things for granted and not resist if you strongly feel that something is deeply unjust, as was this particular thing. Now, the justifications and the excuses that they used were completely out of line. As you know, Gordon, they said something about Nicola Sturgeon politicizing the COVID briefings, which she purposely and deliberately avoided. She made various statements to the effect that she was not going to talk politics, independence, anything other than COVID. And she has been, these daily briefings have been literally a lifeline for certain people, especially people in care homes, people of a certain age who don't have necessarily access to Twitter or online services or live streaming of any other sort. Certain people do like to just sit in front of the telly and get their news, and especially people of certain age groups. A lot of these people were actually on their own, so they awaited these things with great anticipation on a daily basis. Now, obviously, public pressure, but also the bad news I think that we've been getting on COVID over the last couple of weeks or so. Cases are going up. This isn't sadly just a UK or Scottish phenomenon. This is happening across Europe, with obviously schools reopening and the hospitality sector. So we are going to experience challenging times ahead. We're going into winter, and there will be an increase in cases. So these briefings are incredibly important and essential. And I can only say well done to them. Better late than never.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Effie. Chris, over to you for your reaction to this. I know you probably know people who were at today's demonstration. How effective are demonstrations like this, do you think, in showing the BBC people's feelings?
Well, I really can't add any more to the alacrity of Effie's response there. But she pretty much summed it all up. It was a stupid move, and it was always doomed to fail. I recently put out on my Twitter feed that the BBC licensing is losing about 500 uh, 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 payees every month, just over this stupid debacle. And people are actually, people have, for the last 4 or 5 years, people have been sourcing their news feed from other news agencies and stuff like that. The BBC is not the last bastion as it once was back in, the pioneering 50s and 60s. So they really need to get a grip on themselves. They have to stop listening from people like George Folks and Jackie Bailey and caving into peer pressure. Because that's all it is. It's just peer pressure that they caved into.
Well, it's an excellent pun there, since George Fawkes is in fact a peer, Chris, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, listen, let's move on to our next story now. And the UK COVID-19 testing regime is buckling with delays and capacity constraints. A sharp deterioration in the turnaround times and the availability of COVID-19 tests in England saw the government admit that there were challenges to its testing regime that it says has been swamped by demand amid a spike in cases. Only 14% of coronavirus test results in England came back within 24 hours last week, a sharp fall from the week before, according to data on Thursday that adds to the pressure on a government fending off criticism that its strategy is collapsing. The UK government has been under intense pressure over the buckling of its promised world-beating system to test and trace coronavirus cases, meant to protect the country from a second wave of infection as schools reopened this month. There's a challenge in testing, the UK Health Minister Matt Hancock said, adding that capacity for testing was growing. The challenge is that demand has gone up faster. Boris Johnson acknowledged on Wednesday that there was just not enough testing capacity and said that he is aiming for the capacity to do 500,000 daily tests by the end of October. Only 14.3% of test results from all sites were received within 24 hours, compared to 32% the previous week. For tests taken in person at sites around England rather than on samples collected off-site, only a third were returned within 24 hours, compared to 2/3 in the previous week. The chaos in the Lighthouse testing labs is also affecting the turnaround of Scottish COVID-19 test results arranged through the UK portal, and there have been reports of people in England using Scottish postcodes to get a quicker test appointment. Okay, Effie, let me come to you first of all on this. The testing regime that's been put in place, as I understand it, by the UK government, was put out to private tender, I think. Am I right in saying? So is it because of this that they're making a mess of it, or is there some other reason why this isn't working, do you think?
Well, the very first thing that a country has to do, as an organized state, Gordon, and I'm, not really in my capacity as an academic researcher or a writer, but I think simply as a general observation, is to make people feel safe. Otherwise, we don't actually need governments at all, because they're very, very good at lining their own pockets. So if you can't ensure people's safety, both psychological safety, but also material safety, then I'm not quite sure what it is that you're doing. So just to come back to your question, obviously, yes, amongst, your first duties is to set up a health service and a public health service. And let's not forget, through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, England was an exemplar of these, services. And the NHS has been working tremendously well for many decades. So all credit to all the workers and the admin staff and everybody else who were able to put this together. However, in the last 15 years, progressively, everything has been privatized. And now what you're getting is the outsourcing of these vital services, with the topping on the cake being Dido Harding being appointed to replace the previous structure of Public Health England. Now, I'm not sure that Dido is a medical doctor. I believe that she's not. I know she's a very good jockey because I've seen her at Newmarket. But, Serco are now in charge of testing. And obviously, Serco's first consideration is a monetary consideration, is money. They are in it for money. And if duty gets in the way of money is going to come first. Now, I can only say the Scottish system is working because I have had two examples in my immediate environment it was actually last week. A close friend of my daughter's displayed some symptoms. Mum took her into a testing centre, which was a very short drive from here. I believe it was Glasgow Airport. The little girl was tested that same afternoon. And I got a text from her mum the following day at, I believe, just about lunchtime to say negative, let's all breathe. So, personal experience, it's working. But as Nicola Surgeon mentioned, the problem with the testing at the moment is that part of the Scottish testing is also assigned to some English labs. So this is something that we're going to have to watch. But outsourcing, and it's ills. What can I say?
Okay, Effie, thank you very much for that very fulsome answer. Chris, have you anything to add to Effie's assessment here? I mean, I think I remember, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that Deloitte is also involved in the test and trace in some capacity. So I think there are two privatised firms involved.
Yeah, I believe so. I'll follow on from what Effie was saying about the likes of Serco and Mears, two companies that will send a shiver up anyone's spine in Scotland, such as their crass treatment of the asylum seekers that were crammed into hotels during the COVID pandemic. But the other thing as well that strikes me about this is the anecdotal rumours of people in England who are being advised to seek a test in Scotland in order to get the PK or PIR barcode or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, that will then get them onto the English base.
So is this sort of queue jumping, Chris? Is this what we're talking about?
Yes. Well, no, it's not queue jumping insofar as people are they are looking for tests in England and they are being told that the nearest one is full to capacity.
Right, so they're looking for alternatives.
Yeah. They're being told of alternatives 180 miles away, 240 miles away, 500 miles away up in Aberdeen, whatever. Not to go there, but to just obtain the actual QR code and then reapply with that QR code. And hey presto, they get seen. So what we have to watch here is the fact that because Scotland is in this lighthouse situation with all these various things, is the fact that our figures are going to be skewed with.
Yeah, so it's going to affect the Scottish COVID figures too, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah. exactly.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I made the point earlier on today to Alistair Jack, not personally, right enough, but he was in committee basically saying that, the different nuanced situations in the devolved nations are causing, a big muddle up and stuff like that.
So is
Because
this
he reckons the figures were, frankly, one and the same throughout the UK.
yeah.
And yet, I actually sent him the figures for the
Okay.
devolved nation
Chris.
in Wales, Scotland, and England. And lo and behold, he's now in full knowledge
Well,
of the facts.
Chris, I was just going to say there that we will be covering this story just very shortly on this very programme. Now, moving to our next story this evening, and the Labour leader Keir Starmer has come to Scotland. In an interview for TV Border during his visit to Scotland today, the Labour leader Keir Starmer struggled to explain his about turn on his previous statement that the SNP would have a mandate for a Scottish independence referendum if they win a majority in next year's Holyrood elections. Echoing the Tory party in Scotland, Starmer told ITV Border, "I don't think that with a pandemic like this, another divisive referendum is what anybody wants." This is his first visit to Scotland since becoming the Labour leader and follows attempts by some in the centre-right of the party to oust the Corbynite Richard Leonard from office. Effie, I think I'll come to you first again on this. What do we make of Keir Starmer? Has he sort of backtracked on what he said earlier on? It sounded like he sidestepped that question rather.
Well, I'm going to be very brief because I think Chris really needs to answer that one. But all I'm going to say is that I have followed Keir Starmer's academic writing in terms of his great advocacy for human rights and executions in countries where they are still a part of the penal system.
Okay.
And I will say that I know that Keir Starmer is an esteemed and learned man. He is not someone who should be, if you like, succumbing to this sort of narrative. I watched his body language. Very briefly, I'm going to say he knows he's talking absolute nonsense. He probably personally does not even believe what he's saying. But obviously, there is a script that he needs to read, and he's reading it. He's not reading it very well. And he's not up here to convince anyone. He's a bad actor. He should have been in England. He's mentioned the word frustrated. Well, he should have been frustrated about Brexit. He should have been frustrated about COVID. He should have been frustrated about neo-fascism that's creeping up throughout England at the moment. Being frustrated about the SNP. He knows this is absolute mince and nonsense. And he needs to think about this twice.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Effie. That was an excellent answer. Chris, you anything to add to Effie's extremely good answer?
He does.
Well,
Okay.
I mean,
Have at it, Chris.
what can I add on to the end of that? Lovely to hear Effie describing it as complete mince. Look, they tried this once before with Jeremy Corbyn, and it didn't work out. And this is like the forthcoming of the coveted son. Riding into Scotland to be the last bastion of Labour values and all the rest of it. We've got two polar opposites here. We've got Richard Leonard, who is, as you say, a complete Corbynite. And we've got Keir Starmer, who is, a Blairite. And yes, there'll be warm words in between the two. And what's her name? The BBC female reporter, Aisha. Oh God, I can't remember her second name. She is it? Yeah. She was waxing lyrical about the fact that Keir was taking time out, to come up to Scotland and appeal for unity and all of this. But I fully agree with Keir that no party can win an election with disunity and fracturism. yes, he's got it right on the head there. But the elephant in the room for Keir Starmer is the 10,000 odd Labour voters, core Labour voters, comrades of mine, who actually do believe in an independent Scotland. And they're being quashed out of having a voice because their London overlord has taken the decision that Scotland will not have an independence referendum come next year. And for him to take that line of tact, I'm afraid all he done was come up and just battered another nail into the Labour coffin.
All right, Chris, thank you very much for that answer. And moving on now, finance ministers expressed deep concern over the UK internal market bill. Finance ministers from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have met to discuss a range of fiscal matters and voiced their collective concerns about the financial implications the UK internal market bill will have on the devolved governments. Kate Forbes, Rebecca Evans and Conor Murphy expressed their joint concerns on the spreading powers set out in the bill, which override the existing devolution settlement. The powers enable the UK government to undertake spending in devolved areas, including for replacement of EU funding, without any engagement with the devolved nations. Finance ministers also voiced their concerns about what this could mean for the future consequential funding arrangements. Effie, this is, I think, an interesting one. The Celtic nations leaders are getting together now to provide a united front, it seems. What on earth do you think they would talk about, these three? I mean, they're very different countries at the moment, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, but all obviously seething at this internal market bill.
Well, the bill in itself is, as we have discussed previously, and I find it legally, it's an abomination. It basically seeks to supersede both the Act of Devolution and the Act of Union. So it's in that capacity, you're talking about it's seeking to assume sweeping powers over not simply economic powers, social powers, employment powers, but also to do with standards, to do with education, to do with health, but also judicial review. So it's a very, very wide bill which demonstrates and evidences London's intention to become a very, very centralized authority within the previous arrangement of the United Kingdom. And as you say, what this is doing politically is basically empowering the independence debate in Scotland, but also in regards to Northern Ireland. It's also energizing the entire Irish question, and that's not simply supported by whoever may be a supporter of Irish reunification. There is also the EU, who are very much in favor of Ireland, but also we've had America weighing in. And guess what? Dominic Raab's charm offensive has not worked. Who could have guessed? I mean, this was another failure. He went to Washington to support to get support for the bill, and he got booted out. Nancy Pelosi's answer was brilliant. So the bill in itself, they can pass it, but where this is going to lead, it's anyone's guess. But I think, there is an understanding in Scotland, at least, that it's an obvious conclusion.
Thank you, Effie. Chris, it occurred to me actually that in the last line of the item I was just reading, it may affect the so-called Barnett consequentials, because if the UK government is able to simply pump money directly into a local authority, then it can withhold that funding surely from the Scottish government as part of the consequentials.
For sure, of course it can, Gordon, and that's the whole idea of it. Basically, a couple of weeks ago, I likened the UK government to what we used to have in Scotland as the cooperative. And basically their idea was just to keep you on the drip, and just drip feeding you just enough for you to get by. And they don't want to give not just Scotland, by the way. Because this pertains to Wales and it also pertains to Northern Ireland as well. It's all devolved competencies will be treated exactly the same and with the exact same disdain as well. Being able to drip feed money in and not in a lump sum, as is done with the Barnett consequentials. Alongside that, as Effie eloquently put down, is the fact that it is no more than a grab of power in order to centralise all power down to Whitehall, so that basically they can do as they please. And be in no doubt, talking about things like, obvious things like the National Health Service and the water and things like that. But this actually comes down to not just food standards and agricultural standards, but this actually comes down to your roads, right? It basically means that, the Scottish Government will have no say on when they can re-asphalt a road, because it has to get ratified by the Westminster Government.
Chris, can I ask you another question just while we're on that subject? If London is able then, or Whitehall is able to directly fund any project in Scotland, what is to stop them offering bribes, for example, to individual councils to accept the money directly from Westminster? And how many councils do you think would actually resist that temptation?
Well, you would like to think that the councils that are in an SNP control, or at least in an SNP coalition, would have the final veto over that. Obviously, we're not talking about Aberdeen Council, where you've got 9 councillors up there that side with the Tories. We covered that on Monday, I know.
Indeed, yeah.
But what this is, the most damaging, and I can't reiterate this enough, the most damaging thing that can happen in Scotland is for the Holyrood to be reduced to having the powers no more of your average town hall.
Of course,
and if we remember how Scotland was chided back, I can't remember what I think it was Priti Patel. No, it might have been someone else. Can't remember, some other siphon. Anyway, basically, she said that Scotland should have the same powers as a regional authority in England.
No, Caroline Noakes.
Yeah, Noakes, yeah.
So
all it was missing was a wee black and white Doug, and I could have remembered that.
Okay.
But there was also, again, Boris Johnson turning around and giving it, £10 spent in Croydon is better than £1 spent in Strathclyde. Yeah. So, that's you. You've got it in a nutshell. And what I can't understand is the fact that unionists in Scotland actually would prefer £10 to get spent in Croydon rather than £1 being spent in Strathclyde.
Yeah, I know, Chris. Yep. Well, listen.
It's an oxymoron.
It is indeed, Chris. Listen, we need to move on, unfortunately. And talking of the Conservatives in Scotland brings us to our next item. Douglas Ross and Alistair Jack have been told to apologise for misleading a committee. The SNP has demanded that Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross and the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack apologise for playing politics with the pandemic and deliberately misrepresenting past evidence from the Health Secretary Jean Freeman. At an evidence session of the Scottish Affairs Committee today, Douglas Ross stated, "I have a quote in which she," meaning the Scottish Health Secretary, told the Scottish Affairs Committee on the 11th of June, saying she is not aware and could not recall no communication with Mr. Jack. Now, when asked by Ross, who had misled the committee over the meeting, Jack said, "She has." Now, in reality, Jean Freeman's evidence to the committee stated, "I met him, Alistair Jack, on one occasion during the pandemic when Mr. Hancock came to Scotland, and we had a late evening meeting at which Mr. Jack was present. In a further answer, Ms Freeman also said that she had not received any communication from Mr Jack, but that we did have a conversation that Thursday evening meeting. So it's another one of these he said, she said stories. Chris, would you like to take this one first? What is going on here? Why is Douglas Ross telling what appear to be at least untruths in this occasion?
Well, at the outset, is doing exactly as his masters do day in and day out, and quite simply, he's lying through his teeth. He has not been in the job for more than 3 months, and we seen him not standing up for Scotland at the House of Commons vote on the internal market, when he said that he would stand up to Boris Johnson. So he capitulated on that. And quite clearly, he is towing the party line because he is he's in fear of his job, because if he doesn't toe the party line, quite clearly Boris Johnson has said to him and to others that if you don't toe the line, then you are basically out on your backside. And what we're also finding is the fact that other people are actually falling by their sword and actually utilising their principles and offering their resignations. There's been some high-powered resignations in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, chief law lord.
Various law lords, various advocate generals, and all the rest of it, who basically can't have anything to do with this despotic government, because they have been told that if they do the government's bidding, they will not be allowed to practice law in the British Isles ever again.
Okay, listen, Chris, can I stop you there and give Effie a chance to have her say on this? Effie, I know that you understand the legal matters probably pretty well here, but Douglas Ross appears to be, as Chris says, a kind of a puppet here. He's being blown by the winds of Conservative policy. Is there any way any Conservative Party leader in Scotland could ever do anything else?
Well, obviously not, because to be awarded this position, and from what I understand, there is no democratic process. You're simply appointed. So you have to, obviously, as Chris said, you have to toe the party line in a very, very serious way. I mean, let's not forget how Jackson Carlaw was removed from the leadership when he wasn't even aware of it the morning before his own being removed. And also, let's not forget the way in which Ruth Davidson is now effectively acting as party leader prior to taking her ermines in the House of Lords. So there is a very specific hierarchy and a very specific script that needs to be adhered to in order to be appointed by Conservative Party headquarters. And what that results in is the sort of gaffe infested environment in which Douglas Ross has found himself in. And, remember when we were talking about this a couple of months ago, when a lot of people said, oh, well, he may be quite charismatic. Well, guess what? Right now, he's been backed into a corner and he's showing himself to be not charismatic at all. I don't think they run a huge, big chance with him, but, let's see what he comes up with.
Okay, Effie, thank you for that. Now, moving along. Patricia Gibson MP is leading a Commons debate calling for the furlough scheme to be extended. The Tory government came under increased pressure to U-turn on its decision to wind down the crucial furlough scheme by the SNP, who warned that ending the scheme will see a redundancies blitz just before Christmas, and thousands more households plunged into or further into hardship. Leading today's debate on the coronavirus jobs retention scheme, the SNP MP Patricia Gibson urged the Tory government to follow through on its commitment to do whatever it takes to protect the jobs and livelihoods of people by extending the furlough scheme, which the Scottish government say could reduce unemployment in Scotland by 61,000 in 2021, as well as addressing the injustice suffered by those excluded entirely from government support. With local restrictions being put in place across Scotland and the UK, coronavirus cases rising and an impending extreme Tory Brexit that could risk further job losses, Gibson has said that the Chancellor should be extending and strengthening support rather than prematurely winding it down at this critical time. Meanwhile, following a debate in Holyrood, the Tory MSPs have been left isolated as the only party which voted against the extension to the furlough scheme, which would save 61,000 Scottish jobs. 6 countries, Australia, Austria, France, Germany, Ireland and Switzerland have extended their furlough schemes beyond this year, while Italy and Canada have extended them to the end of this year. A Scottish Government report estimates that the direct cost of extending the furlough scheme in Scotland to June is around £850 million, and wider economic benefits, such as increasing GDP, mean that it could pay for itself. Chris, why don't you have a go at this one? Pardon me. So we've got...
I can't get away with the fact that when furlough ends, as we were discussing on Monday night, the Trussell Trust reckon that between 685,000 and 825,000 extra parcels are going to have to be prepared and sent out between the end of October and Christmas. And that's obviously going to be set to continue if people have been made redundant in the way that Patricia Gibson lays out. Patricia Gibson has been leading on this right from the front, and it is to be put under the magnifying glass as to why. What is it? 32 Tories? Is it in Holyrood? Something like that.
Something along those lines, Chris. Yeah.
Something like that. 32 Tories. Again, towing the party line. By basically standing up for their Tory values, of austerity, and actually digging their heels in, where the general consensus of the chamber in Holyrood was, and this is even from the Lib Dems, this is from Wee Willie Rennie as well, that they actually see the merits of the furlough scheme being extended. I think I've got the dog's teeth in tonight. So
I had the same problem earlier, Chris.
The other thing that I would, like to say again, I go back to what I said earlier about the power grab, and the fact that it's not just Scotland that are in this plight. There's comrades down in Wales who have a similar situation where they want to be free from Westminster as well. This is going to impact greatly on them. They've got a great car industry, they've got a great steel industry, their agricultural industry, and all the rest of it is quite frankly going to be decimated. And again, it's going to be replicated again in Northern Ireland, where, going back to what Effie said earlier on, is just going to ramp up the case for a unified Ireland. It's time to break up these islands and let us all go our separate ways.
Okay, Chris, a good note to end on there. Effie, have you anything to add to Chris's rather, I think, quite an excellent reply there? The furlough scheme is obviously it's absolutely essential to people, isn't it? There's no way they can get through another 6 months of lockdown without furlough, or even just getting through the current restrictions.
Well, I will echo every single thing that he said. And just to add a very small thought, this is a very big country, and if it's a powerful country, and in their defense of the union, they say, how are you going to manage outside of the amazing sort of colonial largesse that we can offer, and the brilliance of our munificence. Now, when it comes to actually demonstrating that by doing as other big countries are doing, i.e. Germany, you mentioned the list of countries there, they failed to do so. And this is to do with ideology. I mean, the numbers that Chris mentioned in regards to food banks are shocking. They are to be expected, obviously. This should not be happening in this country. Children should not be going hungry in this country. And I will not say this to canvassing for independence or anything at all. There is no personal gain here, but I will say that small independent countries in the Northern Hemisphere, even in the Mediterranean, I mean, going to places like Croatia and places like that, which have only just recently become independent, they are managing very, very well because they can call upon their own fiscal powers to raise the capital that they need in order to confront these situations. So it's furlough. It's an emergency situation. It needs to be dealt with. But I'm not, when it comes to Rishi and people like that, I'm not holding my breath.
All right, Effie, thank you very much. Okay, moving to America now. The President Donald Trump has been accused of sexual assault by former model Amy Doris. The Guardian is reporting allegations that the US President Donald Trump sexually assaulted former model Amy Doris. The former model has come forward to accuse Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her at a US Tennis Open tournament more than 2 decades ago, in an alleged incident that left her feeling sick and violated. In an exclusive interview with The Guardian, Amy Doris alleged that Trump accosted her outside the bathroom in his VIP box at the tournament in New York on the 5th of September 1997. Doris, who was 24 at the time, accuses Trump of forcing his tongue down her throat, assaulting her all over her body, and holding her in a grip which she was unable to escape from. Via his lawyers, Mr. Trump denied in the strongest possible terms having ever harassed, abused, or behaved improperly towards Doris. Effie, I'd like to hear your reaction to this story. A lot of powerful men get accused by women of assaulting them. Mr. Trump has, I think, displayed, in the past at least, a rather old-fashioned and chauvinistic attitude to women. Is it possible that this could be true?
This is a very difficult subject, Gordon. I think for any woman to be talking about this on television. In regards to the particular Trump accusation, obviously, if there is a legal case ongoing, we'd rather not make a comment. Obviously, we don't know. An allegation has been raised and it should be investigated. I very much doubt that it will be, given obviously Trump's position at the moment within the United States. He's the president. So other accusations that have been raised against him, yes, it might also raise an issue in regards to timing. Statute of limitations in criminal, obviously, this would be in relation to a criminal claim. In relation to a civil claim. In relation to a criminal claim, he would be liable. I'm not quite sure on the law in America, but in this country, he would be liable lifelong. In America, I'm just being reminded that there in America there is statute of limitations. So in this particular case, it's been a long while. However, I will just pick up on the point that you mentioned earlier about power and sexual assault and gendered violence. Now, this is a huge, big topic, and I'm sure we could devote hours to this, Gordon. I've written on this, and it's a very, very delicate subject, and it's to do with our cultural scripting. It's not simply to do with, what X said, what Y, whether Y said no, and whether the no was powerful enough for X to have perceived it as a no. This is obviously, the test for most of these cases. But when it comes to people in power, there is a particular trend for people to completely disregard any indication or any civil behavior, anything that they would in a different cultural setting, and simply go for it. I was on the program with Richard Thompson a couple of days ago, and Kenny was reading out the report about another Tory who was just been Elphick. and the
Yeah.
grotesque scene of a woman saying that, she was being chased around the flat by a naughty, look at me, I'm a naughty Tory or whatever it was. So, you have these things, and what needs to be done is really to look at the law, but also think about retraining human behavior and telling people in power that it is no longer as it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago.
All right. So if you think really it's time that politicians were kind of brought up to date on how to behave around people of the opposite sex or even the same sex in the workplace, yeah?
Better late than never.
Okay, Effie, thank you very much for that. Okay, moving to Europe now, and the European Union Parliament says that Lukashenko should not be recognised as the Belarus president after November. The Belarusian leader, Alexander Lukashenko, should no longer be recognised as president from November when his term expires, the European Parliament said on Thursday, calling for the European Union economic sanctions to be imposed upon him. In an overwhelming show of support for pro-democracy protesters in Belarus, the EU Assembly voted 574 to 37, with 82 abstentions, to reject the official results of an August the 9th presidential election, which the West says was rigged. The EU needs a new approach towards Belarus, which includes the termination of any cooperation with Lukashenko's regime, said Petras Ostravicius, the Lithuanian centrist EU lawmaker, heading the Parliament's efforts to pressure Belarus top officials. While the European Parliament's vote is not legally binding, it carries political weight and can influence how the EU invests in Belarus or grants financial support. Let me come to you on this one, Chris. This, I think, is an interesting one. Lukashenko, deeply unpopular, obviously, in Belarus, and still facing protests daily, as far as I understand it. Will the European Union be able, do you think, to change things in Belarus by applying sanctions?
Well, I I think that the European Union have been playing a very candid game of keeping their cards close to their chest in recent weeks by not directly commenting or interfering in the internal politics of Belarus, and it's fine for them to come out and say that Lukashenko shouldn't be anywhere near any other new leadership bid and whatnot, what have you. That's fine. But that's as far as it should go. And it should be left down to the people of Belarus to actually force change. I've been very supportive of the workers in Belarus who have actually taken to the streets, taken the right of peaceful protest to actually just get a proper referendum done so that their democratic votes are counted and recorded. So whether it's Lukashenko, whether it's Mickey Mouse, whether it's anyone else, people have got the right to have a democratic vote, and it should be done by a complete what's the word? It should be officiated by an outside body so that we can have complete confidence in the vote that actually comes out of any election within Belarus. And the EU should not be engaged in that vote in any such way, shape, or form. It's fine to take a stance on it and whatnot, what have you. Yeah. I dearly wish that they would take a stance on Scottish independence as well. And it sounds to me a bit funny as to why they are saying, well, Lukashenko shouldn't be chapping the doors in Belarus. Well, I don't hear them saying that Boris Johnson shouldn't be chapping the doors in Scotland. Yeah. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know what I mean?
All right, Chris. Well, thank you. It's an unusual angle. And Effie, what do you think about this? Belarus is actually a fiercely independent country, and I know from listening to the reports coming from there that the Belarusian people are not actually that well disposed to Europe, are they? They have a history of keeping their own council, doing their own thing, as Chris was suggesting.
Yes, that's true. And what we've seen is obviously from the EU, a huge amount of discomfort. It's right on their doorstep. And obviously, you've got the big history there with Russia and with the present Moscow regime, where there's so much tension. And the Baltic states are actually on their doorstep, their neighbors. But what we've also seen is a huge amount of bloodshed within Belarus at the moment. We've seen what's happened to the women's movements. We've seen what's happened. Lukashenko has been in power for 26 years, and he's a dictator. So I will say that I'm very much in favor of Lukashenko being critiqued, but also of some sort of external guarantee to ensure that elections are fair and just, and they reflect the true will of the Belarusian people. Now, that has been the problem in Belarus, because he was not elected on 85%. He is a dictator. So there needs to be some external pressure to ensure that something happens, because if you leave it to them, I don't think you can depend on Lukashenko's goodwill. I wish them, obviously, I'm sure that we all wish them good luck. It's been a rough time for them, and it has been actually for quite a long time. So let's pray that they can resolve it, in the short term, rather than be looking into the future for that one.
Okay, listen, thank you very much, Effie. And staying in Eastern Europe for the next story, travellers from Slovenia and Guadeloupe, I'm never sure how to pronounce that, are facing quarantine. Slovenia and Guadeloupe have been added to the list of countries where travellers must quarantine on arrival due to significant increases in coronavirus COVID-19 cases there. Now, this means that people arriving in Scotland from 4 a.m. on Saturday, the 19th of September, are required to self-isolate at home or at another specified address for 14 days. Singapore and Thailand will be added to the list of countries exempt from quarantine due to trend decreases in cases. Chris, you want to have a go at this one? This is, again, very, very selective, isn't it? They're looking, obviously the Scottish Government is looking as well at these other countries and watching how their COVID cases are going. And this seems to change daily, doesn't it? The number of countries which people have to quarantine from. How long is this likely to go on? Do you think we'll keep having to change these things almost on a weekly basis?
Well, just before I comment on this, Gordon, I've actually just got a pound coin here for Effie, because I think she maybe need a wee bit extra light in the meter or something like that over there.
It's got a blackout over there, Effie.
You know what's happening? If I'm going to go turn the light on, that means I'm going to leave that screen for quite a long time. The light switch is about 30 feet away from me. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
so I mean, getting back to the question, Gordon, and I apologise for the levity there.
Okay.
But it is entirely correct that the Scottish Parliament should be able to look, or the Scottish Government should be able to look at other countries and see, best practice, worst practice, what happens there, what worked there, what didn't work there. So it is entirely correct that we should be able to draw comparisons and use the example of other countries.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So you think we should just keep that flexibility? Effie, it's been said in some quarters that the Scottish Government should have a testing system. So rather than people having to go straight into quarantine, that they should be tested on arrival and given the result of that test very quickly. Is there any merit to something like that, or is it even possible at the moment?
Of course it's possible. You've got people tweeting from different parts of the world. I know that in Italy this happens and you get your result within about 50 minutes, I believe. Also in Belgium, a friend of mine just started his master's course in Brussels, and he was tested on arrival. And despite being tested and testing negative, he was then asked to quarantine because he will have to obviously be included within a student setting, dormitories, what have you. So it is very, very possible. And again, because this is being done under the auspices of the UK government, it almost has to be a four nations approach. So you can't simply just go in and impose that, because there is obviously Home Office authority over ports and airports and things like that. So you can't just go in and implement that as a new rule.
Yeah.
It is possible, but it's not being done.
Okay, Effie, thank you very much. Now to our final story this evening, back to Scotland for this one. The Scottish Government is to support Beirut. The three charities helping the people of Beirut to recover from a disastrous explosion are to be supported by £300,000 from the Scottish Government. The explosion in the port area of the city on the 4th of August killed more than 200 people, injured thousands and left up to 300,000 people homeless. The British Red Cross, Christian Aid and Tear Fund will each receive £100,000 through the Humanitarian Emergency Fund, or HEF, to run projects in the city. Charities and local partners will provide funds to those still affected by the disaster so that they can access food and security, as well as shelter and repair to housing, as well also as medical supplies and treatment. The funding will also support community-based organisations who have taken on a range of responsibilities to deliver vital services since the explosion, but are themselves now in urgent need of support to continue. Chris, I think this one is right up your street. I know that you have a strong interest in all manner of refugees and problem areas of the world. This is a great news story. The Scottish Government's managed to find some money to help the people of Beirut, even in a time when we're in a crisis ourselves.
Well, it's a fantastic story, Gordon, and I just wish that we weren't actually ending on this. The HEF is a great way of Scotland being able to show its solidarity for grief-stricken areas around the world, and none more so than what happened in Beirut, as you quite rightly say. An estimated 350,000 people displaced. Some of those people actually still living in their homes, with no windows, just frames. Because they actually need a roof over their head. And I've seen scenes where emergency lighting has been sort of like led through various openings and stuff like that in order to give people light. People have been cooking by gas canister, and just trying to survive. So, as a welcome showing of, as I say, solidarity for people that have been blighted by, what we are referring to just now as a disaster. Throughout time, when the proper investigations are done, will we actually be able to decide whether it's a natural disaster or if there was something
Okay, well, Chris, I don't think it was anything very natural about 3,500 tonnes of ammonium nitrate. But anyway, Effie, I'd like to give you the last comment on the programme this evening. It is good news, isn't it? The Scottish Government has found some money to help these three charities.
It's absolutely brilliant. You know, what happened in Beirut was horrific, and it can happen anywhere. We should never forget that accidents do happen. I will mention, Piper Alpha. It can anywhere in the world there can be a disaster. I will just end on this final point, which is a point of concern. We know that the Department for International Development has now been merged into the budget of the Foreign Office. So these decisions on a UK level will be affected. And obviously Chris Law is campaigning on that. And, we had the long conversation with Richard Thompson as well on Tuesday, I believe, and he had a lot to say about this as well. So these decisions of this nature will be impacted. It was the wrong decision to merge, and it's a fantastic thing that the Scottish Government was able to come to their rescue and alleviate some of the pain.
Okay, if you will listen, thank you. Let's leave it on that optimistic note this evening. Apologies for the lateness of our programme tonight. But anyway, that's about it from Scotland at 7 for tonight. It just remains for me to remind you that if you'd like to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so by following the instructions on your screen now. I'll be back again on Thursday, but meanwhile, from me and from Effie and Chris, a very good night to you. Sorry, I'll be back on Monday, I beg your pardon, not Thursday. Thank you and good night.